Digital overload and chronic stress are becoming growing issues across all age groups in the UK. Now, as a result of this, people are searching for different ways they can switch off from this constant distraction of tech and notifications. So, over recent years, many of our WhatSpa readers have reported that they find hot tubs to be a really great way of getting that tech-free time. So in this video, I speak to the neuro success coach, Marilyn Devonish, who tells us how hot tubs can be useful for those of us struggling with digital overload. Hi, Marilyn. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Oh, I'm fantastic. Lovely to see you. And thank you so much for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here.
Oh, great. Well, I thought I'd just give you a bit of an overview to get us started. So basically, this series is called Meet the Experts, and we're talking to a number of different experts on different ailments, different illnesses, different social problems that people are facing. And we know that there's quite a lot of evidence that hot tubs and hydrotherapy and hot water therapy can be beneficial for these different things. But what we want to do is really speak to experts and get their expert opinion on these subjects. So obviously this video is on digital overload and chronic stress. I just wondered if you could sort of kick it off with an introduction on yourself and, maybe a bit about your background.
Yeah, absolutely. And my name is Marilyn Devonish. When people say, oh gosh, you do so many things, I say sometimes, just to sum it up, I just say the neuro success coach, which is looking at how the mind and brain and neurology work and how you can work with them to create more success. In terms of how I got into doing what I'm doing, for me, it came from a place of stress and anxiety. And I had contemplated suicide in September 2000 because everything had just kind of hit rock bottom. I like to call it, I used to say coincidence, now I say it's synchronicity. People might think of it in terms of fate, but I just ended up signing up for a training because I was very quiet and shy, signed up for a training to improve my communication skills. And it turns out it was just a ton of stuff, much of which I'd never heard of. And at the time I was studying to be a chartered accountant, so really wasn't into this type of work at all. So my initial reaction was to cancel the training because I wasn't someone who even wanted to address those kinds of issues. But they wouldn't give me a refund, so said, come to the training. If you don't get massive value, you'll get a refund at the end. And it was several £1,000s. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to just walk away and leave that kind of money on the table. I'm going to do the training. I'll turn up for 7 days, get my money back, and I'll just get on with my accountancy studies. But during that training, in terms of stress and anxiety and worry and fear and all of that sort of stuff that was going on for me at the time, I went in one end, as you know, this was in October 2000, so a couple of weeks after contemplating suicide, and I came out the other end completely transformed and was like, wow, this is amazing. So I decided to give up the accountancy, become a coach and therapist and hypnotherapist instead. That was 21 years ago. I'm now into my 22nd year. And the rest, as they say, is history. So that in a nutshell is how it all started.
God, that's so fascinating how it all came together then for you. So when we're talking about digital overload and chronic stress and all of these things that impact people, what's your kind of experience of working with adults and children with these issues? And have you found that things have changed over the pandemic or over recent years?
With one of the things, excuse me, with regards to children and stress, and it was quite interesting. I started working with adults back in October 2000, and that was what they were presenting with: stress, anxiety, worry. That wasn't necessarily the root cause and the cause of the stress, but that's how people presented. They wanted to do that. I also teach something called photo reading, which is about accelerated learning. So the premise of that is how to get through written material and books at 25,000 words per minute and get through books in 5 minutes. So often when people are attracted to that is because they're overloaded with the amount of information that they have to read, whether that be traditional books or digital documents, emails, things online. We've got it all coming from all directions. So I've been a photo reading instructor since 2002. My foray into children, because I was invited by a school in 2008 to go and work with a room full of 8-year-olds, 26 8-year-olds. And I'm thinking, well, when I approach this with adults, I'm talking about stress and anxiety and overload and feeling like you're just keeping your head above water, and all of those things, not being able to focus, not being able to concentrate, but actually really wanting to improve their creativity, their intuition, their critical thinking skills, decision-making skills. And I'm thinking, okay, 8-year-olds, how do I start here? So I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll talk about gently one of the subjects that I broach with adults. And I just said, how many of you know what stress is? Pretty much all the hands went up, and I'm like, I wonder if they understand what I'm saying. So I said, can someone just give me an example? You know, what is stress? How would you describe it? They went on to not only explain what stress was, but they were actually stressed. And I was like, wow. And I mean, I'm not a good example because I had some serious problems growing up. And by the time I was 8, I was already going through some really bad stuff. But I'm in front of a room full of children who probably haven't been abused as a child, yet they are super stressed. And I was like, wow. So my starting point, although I use very different language with 8-year-olds, it was exactly the same as I was tackling with the adults in terms of stress, anxiety, worry, imposter syndrome. They wouldn't have called it imposter syndrome. You would have called it peer pressure when talking to 8-year-olds. And I then went on and taught, you know, modules of that class for 8-year-olds right through to 16-year-olds. But it was exactly the same as presenting with adults, just for slightly different reasons. But the two were very similar. And that really, really did surprise me back then, because I was like, wow, I didn't expect that.
Yeah, absolutely. You just wouldn't expect at that age. You think childhood, well, it should be such a carefree time, I suppose. Obviously, for various reasons, it is, you know, can be stressful. So what would you say, like in your line of work, what are the main types and causes of chronic stress and anxiety that you come across? And how is this sort of impacting people's lives, of people that are suffering of their lives?
And it's an interesting one. I'm also what you call a mental health first aid trainer. So we're doing it online for the past year and a bit, but you know, going into organizations to teach their staff how to be mental health first aiders. So there's a slide that we take people through, which is looking at the causes of stress. It's basically like a just list of life, family issues, relationships, work pressure, financial pressure, physical illnesses, challenges with your children. You know, the list is long. Moving house, travel, all of those things. And actually the travel one, what it used to mean is that the pressure of traveling, you know, you're here, you're there, you're everywhere with your work and all that sort of thing. Now there's a different pressure in traveling in post-pandemic times, which is the fear of just being around people, the fear of being in those spaces. So the list is long in terms of how it can impact people, how it shows up in their daily lives. One of the things we talk about on the mental health training is it could be that people are suddenly very angry. So the slightest thing might set them off, whereas previously they've been pretty chilled, they've been pretty laid back, they've been pretty calm. It could be the opposite. People find themselves withdrawing either from life or withdrawing from social life, not wanting to do the things that they used to do, suffering from anxiety. Now, sometimes you can see anxiety as a state in terms of someone's physiology. It's almost like you can see the fear, the tension, the shaking, whatever it is. Other times it's internal in terms of how it might affect someone internally, their confidence, their self-esteem, their sense of self-belief. If they have got something going on and it's a challenge, whether that be a diagnosable mental health condition or the stresses of life, there's a stigma attached to that sometimes. If you're in a high power, I remember very early on when I started out as a coach and therapist for the first 9 or so years, I do these things called breakthrough sessions where you come in the morning, we work together for 7 or 8 hours, do a load of stuff and cool things, and you go out the other end at the end of the day completely transformed. So a very high powered female executive came in and she said, I feel like I'm just keeping my head above water. And I'm just a few steps away from being found out. Now, she was running a massive team in a big investment bank in London, the most capable woman you could ever hope to meet, but because of the stress and the pressure, had very little self-confidence, very little self-belief, and doubted herself every step of the way, even though she was incredible and brilliant. So it can show up in the most unusual of ways, but it can impact everything. It can impact relationships, because people might then go and take that out on their partner, or they're snapping at the children, or even it's too much. You can't even interact with your family when you get home because of all of the pressure that's going on. So it just shows up in a myriad of ways, and even changes in sex drive. So I'd say to people, you can't just go, oh, somebody's snapped at me, or they're very quiet, and go, that's it. You take the bigger picture. But the thing I say, if somebody is very different, they weren't always like that, then that's, or missing work deadlines, just so many different ways it can show up. But and I'm guessing most of the people who are listening here and watching here would have at some time experienced that. But when we're talking about serious stress, this is ongoing for a long period of time, not the occasional stressful day or even stressful week. This is a continuous period.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think there's so many people that are going to be watching this that will completely relate to a lot of the stressful events that you've just mentioned. And there's a lot of research to suggest that chronic stress and anxiety is on the rise, and various different ideas of why that could be. I mean, obviously, world events like we went through or are going through the pandemic, other historical events happening. Or do you think it's more to do with sort of modern life, and when we talk about digital overload, sort of the fact that you're kind of always sort of at the beck and call of your phone, like, you're constantly in communication with people, and social media pressures, etc. Like, where do you see the stress coming from in your experience?
Stress is one of those things. I'm gonna say always. I can't speak for predating myself several hundred years ago, so let's just talk about, as far as my life experience has been thus far, looking at the world, stress is one of those things that's always been here. In terms of the quantifiable numbers, 822,000 people in the past, 2020 to 2021 have some sort of stress, anxiety reported in the workplace. The economic cost of that is 105 billion, that's billion with a B, 105 billion pounds. That's our most recent snapshot. If we went back, I had a look this morning, looking at 2018, it was 0.6 million and 0.6 million people. So we're now 822,000, and the number in terms of the quantifiable cost markedly different. It was something like a 20–30% change. So a lot of that, as we're seeing, and I'm going to be interested to see the numbers for 2021/22, but a lot of that would of course be down to the pandemic and what's been going on. But if you think back 10 years ago, when there was a global recession, for example, that was a trigger point. And many people and businesses were just getting over that when the pandemic hit, even though it wasn't necessarily in our conscious day-to-day thinking. So I think there's always something going on in the world. If you think back to the crash in Wall Street in the 1920s, that was, that again, that was so there's always something going on in the world. When I was growing up in the era of the Falklands War, we've now got what's happening in Russia and Ukraine. So take any slice of modern day life, and there are going to be things in there that bring massive amounts of pressure and stress potentially. So I don't think it's a new thing. However, what I would say that's been different now in terms of what we've gone through in the last 2 years, many people who previously maybe hadn't experienced that before, hadn't been in the place where they were feeling the pressure of the digital or being stressed by what they were seeing and hearing and watching in the digital space. I'd say that's the thing that's different, because the pandemic and the lockdown affected everyone. So let's just say you had your own business, bars, pubs, all those sorts of things, nightclubs, I've a lot of my clients, massage therapists and physical therapists, boom, all gone. If that doesn't bring you a level of pressure and stress, you must be a saint. And so the key thing now has been working with people to help them, how can I say this, ride the wave, given that we're talking about water, but weather the storm. It's that sort of thing. So it's not about saying, hey, look, we can change necessarily everything that's going on in the world. The key thing now has been, okay, let's look at your reaction to it, and how do you get through this without having a complete breakdown and a meltdown. But it's always been there. But yes, of course, the last 2 years have really brought that to a head and laid stress at the door of people who previously wouldn't have, in terms of their life and their lifestyle, it wasn't something that really got too much in the way for them.
Absolutely. And it has been a sort of really ridiculously stressful time for everyone, hasn't it? And I know that a lot of our followers are parents, and something that I know that parents are concerned about at the moment is the kind of, particularly right now with, you know, post-pandemic, if that's what we can call it, I don't know, but the mental health of their kids, and worrying about how much sort of digital overload they're experiencing, and they might be seeing sort of different behaviors like social isolation and overusing social media, and, you know, being very much on their screens all the time. Is that something that you've seen in your work, or is that, and how would you kind of suggest people deal with that?
I mean, it's an interesting one. And again, you know, I'm thinking back to a particular family that they flew in from Switzerland to come to the photo reading workshop, and their son was a gamer. And so this was causing some, you know, concern in terms of the amount of time he spent on screen, etc., etc. And I would say a similar thing now, as I said to them. Yes, you can do the thing where you might even have a simple rule. No devices over dinner, for example, and that's everyone. So parents can't say no devices over dinner and then be over dinner on the device, because I've, you know, when I've spoken to families, kids have laughed and they go, well, yeah, mum and dad say that, but they still bring theirs to the table. And I was like, if it's going to be the rule, it's going to be the thing, it's going to be the thing. The adult version of that, which was really, I think, is a fun and cool thing, I don't know if you've ever seen it on social media, is when you go out to dinner, everyone puts their mobile phone into a bread basket in the middle of the table, and the one who caves and looks at it over dinner has to pay for the meal. If nobody caves, you just get your phone at the end and you all kind of split the meal between you. But, you know, there can be fun things that you do in terms of this. But I'd say, you know, instigating some of those simple things. There will be the odd time, depending on the family dynamic, because it's very individual, but there will be times I'd say to parents, go to where they are. Invite yourself in, have a go at Fortnite or whatever the game of the moment is. Now, you're probably not going to be good at it, but that's not the point. You're not playing, well, some parents will play to win because they're very competitive and they don't like losing, but I say that's not the point of the exercise. The point of the exercise is to kind of see actually what's going on, what it's all about. There was one of my clients who was very creative, he worked in IT, and I says, can you create a version of the old Pac-Man? Really basic stuff where you had the thing come and it had to kind of get a molecule. And he said, yeah, I can. I said, well, create that and show your kids what it was like back in the day, and just have fun with it around that. So there can be times like you can say, look, let me step into your world, but there will also be times where you're drawing the boundaries. And also if it's the point of where they're at an age where you need to be aware of what they're doing, then there are various things that you can put on. So you're going to prohibit them from going into particular spaces with electronic locks and all of that stuff. That's a completely different kind of conversation. But I would say instigating maybe something that's the old-fashioned, you know, family dinner on XYZ day, so you're actually building that in, or whatever it is. If you're a family that likes the outdoors, let's all go for a walk together. The rule again is you might be able to bring your device, but you're not allowed to look at it. You know, do you know what I mean? So it's just doing fun, creative things. If children like reading, so it's World Book Day, you know, in March. So it could be one of my clients when she was feeling disconnected from her children. I said, what are you all in? Is there something you all enjoy doing? And she said, I suppose reading. I said, well, okay, why don't you all have a particular evening where you all sit down in the living room and just read. Now they're all reading completely different things. So she sat there, her son sat there, her daughter's in her favorite armchair, and she says, Marilyn, even though we were all in our own books, it was completely magical. We just felt a form of connection that we don't normally have. And if we're now talking about hot tubs, what better way to be in a place where you're all connected than sitting like that? So I would say, if you can, building in those family times, don't make it like every single night, but, you know, 1 or 2 nights a week, maybe start with one, where you're going to think, what's one thing the whole family can do that we can all enjoy? And it might even be a trade. All right then, you're on your screen playing your game XYZ, but on Sunday afternoon, you have to play one of our games, and you choose one from back in the day. Twister always used to be a firm favorite once people get into it, and just do it, you know, find ways to actually make it fun, because if it comes from too authoritarian, people are going to naturally push back on that. But if there's a bit of a trade and something that's a fun way to do it without it feeling as though you're being deprived, because that's the thing that people often feel when you have to kind of lay down the law, and there are times you obviously have to do that, but if initially starting with what's a fun way, can we introduce something into the mix?
Yeah, that's so helpful, all those pointers you just gave, particularly about like just having those boundaries, like whether it's a physical boundary of like actually putting the phone away, or you know, or just sort of putting those fun like family activities in place, etc. So just because we're to bring it back to hot tubs, we know that there's a lot of medical evidence to suggest that kind of hot water therapy and hot tubs in particular are really beneficial for people struggling with chronic stress and anxiety, and families, you know, struggling with that sort of thing, and the fallout from digital overload, I guess. Have you had an experience of that, or what would you say? I don't know if there's any insight into water like therapy and how it can help people. Like, is there anything that you can kind of talk us through with that?
With water therapy, it's something I started doing about 30 years ago. That's 30, not 3, because I was ill myself. So started looking into what can I do at home that will help me. I've got a bath sitting right there. I'd already been into aromatherapy, so that was, and crystals. So I used to make my own aromatherapy skin oils and hair oils, etc. Used crystals for relaxation and meditation. And it was like, well, actually, you can combine the two. There are even crystals that are made for being in the water. And I had a look because I thought, I don't want people just running and throwing aromatherapy oil into their hot tub, because that's going to mess with the pH of the water. But there are actually a couple of companies out there who make aromatherapy oils for hot tubs. So they maintain the pH and they do not clog up the jets. And so bringing aromatherapy into it was absolutely lovely. In terms of what I was doing with my baths, there's something where you can make what you call sole, S-O-L-E, sole water with Himalayan salt, where the salt is big blocks of salt and you're dissolving them over a period of days. Sometimes it takes about a week for the thing to dissolve, and then you use some of that solution in a bath. A quick way to do it is Epsom salts, for example, and even something as, well, I say as simple as, there's any people who are watching this, you might want to look him up. His name is Masaru Emoto, and one of his series of books basically were called Messages in Water. And one of the things that he found a way to break down the molecules of water and have them under a microscope. So when you see, I'll just quickly flash that just to give people a sense of what I'm talking about. But that's the molecule for love. So he found that when they spoke to water or put a sign on the petri dish or the jar that it was in, and then they looked at the molecules, if it was something like love or joy or happiness, the molecules were absolutely beautiful. They looked like snowflakes. If it was something like hate, anger, fear, or they said to the water, I hate you, but to the other they said, I love you, and then they looked at the molecules for the negative words were black and dark and broken. It just looked like bleh. Whereas all of the I love you, happiness, joy, the molecules are absolutely beautiful. And he replicated this over and over and over again. He's got a series of books. I've got 3 of them that I own. But just really fascinating. And so when I first learned about that, I was already doing my best to what I call imprint my water. But I thought, actually, this is really interesting. What if when you're in the bath, in the shower, or in your hot tub, you actually just imagine? So I started doing healing waterfalls where I would imagine, or in the bath, that, you know, I'm surrounded in love. I'm surrounded by joy. There's an overflow of happiness coming from the pipes, and it's so simple. So I would say with the hot tub, when you're sitting in the hot tub, you might just imagine if this water was filled with a particular energy, what would it be? And if you chose joy, then while you're sitting in the hot tub, or if you don't have a hot tub, you're sitting in the bath. If you don't have a bath, you're in your shower. It works with all of those. And just imagine. If someone is a fan, for example, so, you know, I have various crystals around the house, but this is a really nice one that you could just plonk it there, right there next to you, on the side of the hot tub, on the side of the bath, and you just use your imagination. Even if you don't think it's going to do anything energetically, it's just really beautiful to look at. And if you just had 30 to 60 seconds of mindfulness, just looking at that, just looking at the facets, depending on where you've placed it, the light is going to be hitting it in different ways, and you just lose yourself in that for a short amount of time. It can be enough to give you a mental and physical break state. And then when you add that, like you said, to all the benefits of the hot tubs, really fascinating, people looking at, you know, the impact it has on the cardiovascular system, the impact it has on the muscles, because you're able to relax the muscles. There's not all that kind of usual daily pressure and stress that's on them. So many benefits of water treatments and water therapies, but just the whole thing about imprinting. And if you don't have the aromatherapy, because for skin reasons, again, you've got to check all this out medically. You may not want to put it in your bath, but if you do, you don't just throw the oil in there. It has to be mixed with a carrier oil. But if you weren't doing that, you could just have an aromatherapy burner. So you're in the hot tub or you're in your bath, the burner is there, or now you've got the diffusers where you put the water in, you put the oil in, and then you get the smoke coming up. Those can be placed pretty much anywhere safely. And now if it's around water and it's electricity, make sure it's a distance away. But using all of those kind of common sense precautions, you can still have the benefits of those things, whether you're surrounded physically in it or if you have it in the environment. There can be so many wonderful ways that you can use the energy of water for health and healing and well-being. It's just amazing.
Yeah, that's so fascinating, because I've always felt that water is really healing from like an energetic level, as well as obviously physical and everything like that. But that, yeah, I might have to ask you afterwards about that, but that's fascinating to me. So if we're talking about like families then, and how, you know, we used to have the kind of the dinner table as the place where we would find connection and talk about our days and stuff, and how that's sort of becoming, I guess, a little bit more difficult with like the influx of tech and constant communication with others on social, etc. Would you, I guess, is there a way that you think that maybe families could move towards having like a hot tub as like a almost replacement of that connection? And like, because you can't have your phone and you can't have, you know, other devices really. Like, do you think that could be quite a fun way of sort of bringing that back? I don't know.
Do you think it's a really fabulous way, and it would be lovely if it didn't have to replace it, if it was in addition to. But if people are finding that they're not having because people are in and out sometimes at different times, so the traditional time where you'd all be sitting around the table at 6:30, maybe for some that is a thing of the past given work schedules and the way that things have changed. But yeah, that is a fantastic way to do it. And like, you're right, the likelihood of wanting to have your phone in the hot tub, even if there's just the risk of dropping your £1,000 device into the hot tub, that's not a good proposition. But no, it's a really, really fantastic way to do it. And I don't know if you ever go to the Ideal Home Show, where they have those, what I call those monster tubs, where seriously you can get like 3 families in them. They're like massive swimming pools. If you're lucky enough to have one of those, then, you know, there are even ways that you can do fun games, water aerobics, all of those sorts of things. But no, it's a fantastic way to really have people just sit and relax, enjoy the health benefits, and have that real sense of connection, because there is an intimacy with a hot tub. You know, you're out of your usual daily attire and it's just you and your skin, whatever you're wearing in terms of your bikini, your trunks, etc. But it's a different kind of dynamic and experience. And I found, even when going away on holidays, etc., if you're in the hot tub with a couple of strangers, they don't remain strangers for very long, because there's a natural tendency to just, you know, have conversation. It's just it's a different dynamic. And if people haven't been in that dynamic, it sounds a bit like, well, what will be different? No, it really is. So if families haven't yet done that, I would highly, highly recommend it as a really fantastic. And of course, you know, if you can have your snacks around the side, again, be careful of dropping things in the hot tub, but it can be quite an experience. And it may be, if people, because I know the intention is always there, even if you're not doing it every single week, get it in the schedule, get it in the diary. And it might even be that it goes, because I'm in a WhatsApp group with my sisters, for example. I mean, I've resisted WhatsApp for many years because I'm like, I've got enough going on. I don't need another messaging facility, but I had to get it for the work I do as a counsellor. So now I'm on it. I'm in my sister's WhatsApp group. So that's how we keep in touch with what's going on. So it could be that you schedule the hot tub meeting using technology. If you've got a family WhatsApp, which many families do now, use that and bring technology in. So find ways not to make it the enemy, and look at how you can use the technology to your advantage to facilitate the way that the family dynamic is now working in, 21st century.
Yeah, that's so interesting how you say about like bringing the technology in, and obviously like not seeing it as an enemy, because it is something that we all have to kind of live with, and obviously there's a lot of positive effects, like and positive impacts of it. I mean, we wouldn't be having this conversation if we didn't have Zoom and all of these kind of things. So yeah, I mean, completely. And so I guess if a family is struggling and they've found that their kids are becoming really withdrawn, and they're very much shut in their room on their devices, and they're sort of becoming quite, I guess, like isolated in a way, would you sort of consider recommending to someone that they think about investing in a hot tub, so that they've got that, like, on a, they've got there, it's that facility, it's just always there, you know what I mean?
And I guess it's going to depend on your space resource and your financial resource. But if someone is able to do that, I actually think just think of the joy. Well, speaking for myself now, and I'm just going to have some imprinted water. Just speaking for myself now, I remember the joy of getting a hotel room and there was a hot tub in it. I'm like, yes, there is something really, really special about the hot tub. So absolutely, if a family can do that and invest in that. Now, coming back to the withdrawal, I'll say the same thing that I said with regards to the stress. If your child has always been quiet and withdrawn, that might be the way they are. If you know that the dynamic has changed, then that's where you really want to start paying attention. But regardless of which two it is, finding a way to communicate that speaks their language. So when I'm teaching the accelerated learning, the reason it's so successful, regardless of where someone comes from, or whether they've got dyslexia and dyspraxia, or they're a visual learner, etc., it's because it works with the learning styles, it works with the different communication styles. So it may be that you're going to have to start where your child is at and speak to them in their language, at their level. And if somebody's watching is going, well, I don't know what that is, I'm like, well, therein might be one of the challenges and the problems, because we communicate in the way that we communicate, and we're not necessarily thinking about how other people communicate. So I'd say that's a pivotal piece as well. And then it's kind of the invitation is then, how do you make this palatable and fun, rather than, well, you've now moved me from sitting in my room just sitting in the hot tub, because kids can be a little bit like that. So it's then, okay, what can we do to make this fun, to make this enjoyable? And if you already have the tradition that you talk about your day, then bringing some element into that. Or it might be that this is, hey, we're planning a family vacation, or we're planning to do X, Y, Z, and let's all get into the hot tub and let's talk about that. Let's share some ideas. What do we want to do? And it's a place where you go. So there's something called anchoring, and there's something called NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. There's an aspect called anchoring. And when you're a speaker, you anchor the stage. So there's a place that you will stand to just deliver your talk and presentation. There's a different place that you will stand to deliver bad news, and you only go there when there's bad news. And then there's a different place that you stand to move people into action. Exactly the same with the hot tub. My suggestion would be, do not use the hot tub for telling off, for berating, for laying down the law, because then it becomes a negatively anchored space. My suggestion would be, use the hot tub for the fun things, so that when your children think of the hot tub, when you think of the hot tub, you remember the great conversations you've had, the wonderful ideas that you came up with, the plans that were made, the excitement of, what are we going to do? And I would suggest that you start from day one using the hot tub as a positive space, so that the positive anchor is there and people actually want to get into the hot tub, because as they think about the hot tub, all of those feelings come rushing back. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That's so interesting. And everything you've said today, I think is going to really help people that are, struggling with this digital overload and stress, and particularly parents when they're sort of thinking, oh God, what can I do? They've tried lots of different things and they haven't thought, this, obviously some of these ideas are quite outside the box, but why not? Why not give them a go? So I really appreciate you chatting with me today, and it's all been so interesting. Obviously, before we go, I just want to make sure that we've got details on where people can contact you, if they can find you on social media or anything like that. Obviously, we've just spoken about how it's all awful and stressing us out, but yeah, if you've got anywhere that people can contact you, then yeah, please do go for it.
Absolutely. So my website, I'll say it and I'll spell it because it's an unusual spelling. It's transformationstm.com. So www.trance, T-R-A-N-C-E, as in hypnotic trance, F for Freddie, F-O-R-M-A-T-I-O-N-S, T-M as in trademark. So transformationstm.com. My email is marilyn@transformationstm.com. And Marilyn is M-A-R-I-L-Y-N for November. Same spelling as in Marilyn Monroe. On social media, it's pretty much /Marilyn Devonish, and Devonish is D-E-V for Victor, O-N-I-S-H, apart from Instagram, where it's the Neuro Success Coach. So very easy to find on social media. Would be fantastic for people to keep in touch. And I have a regular monthly newsletter where I kind of put out information and invite people to events and test out new processes, etc. So feel free to join me there as well.
Oh, absolutely. And we'll add in all of those handles and everything to make sure that people can find you really easily. So thank you so much. And yeah, thank you so much for chatting to us. This has been great.
Oh, you're most welcome. Well, thank you for the invitation. Hope you all found it useful and really fantastic to be invited. Wonderful to speak to you too.